Justice Antonio Carpio. Justice, good to see you again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for inviting me again, Pingky.
Welcome. So PhilHealth and PDIC funds, you are alleging that both funds coming from PhilHealth and PDIC were transferred to the National Treasury and were used for flood control projects. What and how did you come to this conclusion, Justice?
Well, in the 2024 General Appropriations Act, in the unprogrammed appropriations, they added a new provision which never appeared in previous General Appropriations Act. The excess funds from GOCC's government-owned and controlled corporations may be transferred by the Department of Finance to fund the unprogrammed appropriations. So this is the first time that they're getting money from GOCCs. Before, the unprogrammed appropriations could be released if there are excess funds from revenue collections from taxes or non-taxes. Non-taxes revenues like dividends or filing fees. But for the first time, they are getting this from trust funds of PhilHealth and PDIC. And so the Secretary of Finance issued the regulations to implement this provision, the Circular 3-2024. And it says there that once the transfer is made by order of the Secretary of Finance and the National Treasurer acknowledges receipt of the remittance, the National Treasurer shall issue a certification to this effect, and this certification shall constitute as authority for the DBM to release the funds for the unprogrammed appropriation. So once there is a certification by the National Treasurer that remittances have been received from the PDIC or PhilHealth, then the Secretary of the Department of Budget and Management will release the funds for the unprogrammed appropriation. And these
I'm
funds...
just going to cut you there, Justice. So the line of succession, parang ganun po, is how it flows rather, is that from the PDIC and PhilHealth, may extra po silang pondo, inutos po ng gobyerno, dalin po nyo yan sa National Treasury. The National Treasury says, DBM, there's already a certification. Once the DBM knows that, they release the funds.
Yes, that's
and
correct.
they release it via the unprogrammed appropriations.
Yes. The unprogrammed appropriations contain an item which says, in support of the general infrastructure of the government. And that the capital outlay for that infrastructure program is about 160 billion.
Okay.
The total transfer from the funds of PhilHealth and PDIC was about 167 billion.
So malapit.
Yeah, it's they had more they have over 7 billion in excess, which they can use for other purposes. But for capital outlay alone, the maximum they can use is 160 billion.
But is there actual proof that the money from PhilHealth and PDIC went to the National Treasury to the DBM, and the DBM to the flood control projects?
There's complete proof. From the transfer of the fund from PhilHealth and PDIC, there was an actual remittance, and there was a certification by the National Treasury that he received the money. Mm-hmm. And on the part of the DBM, they issued what is called the Special Allotment Release Order. Mm-hmm. And that Special Allotment Order will state for what purpose. It will state there, this is for flood control project in district so-and-so in Bulacan.
Right.
So the SAROs are there. So far, the SAROs amount for this flood control project, they have gathered about 107 billion in SAROS for flood control projects under the unprogrammed appropriation.
So, ginamit ho itong perang ito para dun sa mga SARO, para sa mga flood control
Yes,
projects.
in
Okay.
effect, that SARO, which the SARO states for the flood control project.
Okay. First,
And this will actually release.
yeah. But is it legal? What I want to find out is that particular Department of Finance Circular 003-2024, is it legal? Is it lawful? Because according to you, this is the first time that this happened in the in AGAA, particularly in 2024.
We actually went to the Supreme Court to question the constitutionality of this. Isambayan, which I chair, and others filed a petition. And we're expecting that decision anytime now. And we have two grounds for asking the Supreme Court to declare this particular new provision unconstitutional. First, the Constitution says no law shall be passed authorizing the transfer of appropriation. This is a law that authorizes the transfer of appropriation. So it's very clear. But there is an exception under the Constitution on the transfer of appropriation.
If
The President,
yeah.
for the entire executive branch, may transfer savings from one item to another to augment another item. But what he can transfer, first of all, only the President can be authorized by
Okay.
law.
So not the Secretary of
Not the
Finance.
Secretary.
Okay.
So that makes it unconstitutional already. Second, even the President cannot transfer the appropriation itself. He can transfer only savings. But these are not savings.
Okay. I'm gonna
Because these are trust funds.
Yeah.
The second provision of the Constitution that we invoke is that it says there in the Constitution that revenues raised through taxation for a specific purpose shall be treated as a special fund which shall be used only for a specific purpose. So all of these funds for PhilHealth came from, or mostly came from the sin taxes. Every time you buy cigarette or buy alcohol,
vape,
then a big portion of that, the big portion of that goes to PhilHealth. That is a special fund raised through taxation, and therefore it can be used only for PhilHealth activities.
So my question is, if number one, to your point, that only the
Yes.
there is no, you cannot transfer funds. Basically, I'm going
Yes,
to try
yes.
to make it simpler. Bawal pong mag-transfer ng
ng
pera.
appropriation.
However, if the president orders it, number one, it can be.
It can be, but only from savings.
Yes, I was gonna go there. Pero kailangan po savings. Number one kasi, kailangan po ang Pangulo. But it wasn't the President that
It
ordered
wasn't,
this because it says, under Department of Finance Circular 003-2024. Justice, what if, pwede ho bang, but the Secretary of Finance would not have done that without the primature of the President. Would that be acceptable?
Well, but the Constitution is very specific. Only the President can be authorized. So if you authorize somebody else, that's what we call undue delegation of legislative authority. That's
Kurakot pa more.
unconstitutional. So
BBM.
on that ground alone, it's unconstitutional. Plus the fact that even the President cannot transfer appropriations. He can transfer only savings.
Yeah, so I want to go there. The next one is the issue on savings. What I want to understand, Justice, is this excess funds or is this savings? Why? Because in that particular circular, it says the GAA states that excess funds from government-owned and controlled corporations, excess. So there has to be a distinction. Were the PhilHealth funds excess or were they reserved?
They were reserved because, first of all, under that second provision of the Constitution, it says special funds raised through taxation for a specific purpose can be used only for that purpose unless the purpose has been accomplished. And therefore, if the purpose has been accomplished, the balance will revert to the National
I
Treasury.
see.
But PhilHealth
But
has
how
not,
can we say that the purpose has been
it has
accomplished?
not been
It's
accomplished
impossible.
because
It's not even half accomplished,
yes,
Justice.
because the coverage, although everybody's covered, actually not everybody can avail of. I mean, we all know that you go to the hospital, PhilHealth cannot pay for everything.
Yeah. Okay. I want to bring this in though. There is, as you mentioned a while ago, this is already being questioned right
Yes.
before the Supreme Court. It was the Government Corporate Council who said this. PhilHealth's remittance of its fund balance to the National Treasury, in compliance with the Department of Finance circular, is lawful. He says that he emphasized that PhilHealth's return of fund balance does not impair the constitutional right to health. Hindi po niya sinisira o naapektuhan ang constitutional right to health, noting that despite the 60 billion pesos in remittance, the agency's operating budget for 2025 has increased to 284 billion, more than its 2024 budget. In other words, it didn't affect it. It should not affect it because in fact kumita pa ang taas ng kinita ng PhilHealth noong taong 2025 does not impair the constitutional right to health. Who determines the constitutional right to health? Because there could be various explanations or expectations, if you may, on constitutional right to health. Justice.
Well, on that claim that it did not impair the constitutional right to health, you can debunk that by saying, why did you increase 50% the remittance by taxpayers? They increased the fee. I mean, why did you have to increase it if there was enough funds already? So they had to increase it because they got that 60 billion.
You mean an increase in what?
Contribution.
I see. Of the members.
Yeah, they increased the contribution by 50%. So it goes against their claim that these are excess funds.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Secondly, it doesn't matter whether it impaired or not because this is a constitutional provision that only the president can.
Number one.
Yeah, only the president can, and therefore that transfer, whether it was detrimental or not, cannot be done because it can only be done if the person authorized to transfer is the president. So, and we all know that PhilHealth needs funds. I mean, a lot of people are complaining that PhilHealth only contributes so much, maybe less than 20% of your total bill.
You're lucky at 20%.
You're lucky at
Justice, we'll be taking a very short break. We'll continue our discussion with the retired Supreme Court. Summarize it on two you were calling violations. First, it has to come from the president. And number two is that, basically the money that goes to PhilHealth via the sin taxes is supposed to go solely to PhilHealth. That's actually been the debate way back, even when government decided not to pay its share of the indirect members during the year 2025, or was it 2024? I don't really recall the year, but there was a lot of concern because the direct members, kami po, ay patuloy pong nagbibigay, supposed to be. Tapos yung parte ng gobyerno to pay for the indirect ones, the senior citizens, persons with disabilities, etc., poorest of the poor, they didn't give their share in the last budget, I believe. All right, so here's another thing that I am curious to find out from you. Would this be, could fall into technicalities? Because one could say, because of the circular, which you're already contesting, that it should not come from the Department of Finance, ang tawag po kasi nila is excess. Is there a difference between excess and reserve? Because could that come up as a possible point of contention?
Well, the law, the PhilHealth Charter, requires PhilHealth to maintain a reserve. That has never been reached. Since they transferred 60 billion, it even went down, the reserve. So if you talk about excess and reserve, first of all, the reserve has never been reached. That's why this has to be accumulated over the years, no? And excess, well, if you talk of excess, that means you don't need it for that year. But so many hospitals have not been paid. So many private hospitals are closing because PhilHealth has not paid them. I know my own doctor is complained to me that they own a small hospital and PhilHealth has not been paying them.
Am I simplifying too much? Because this is the first time I heard about it, that the reserve has never been reached.
Yes.
Is it possible for savings to actually be put on the reserve so that you're actually on that bar that is expected of the reserve amount, sir?
Yes. The reserve amount is stated in the law. And it's there's a formula for that. It has not been reached yet up to now.
Yeah, so then goes my question again. Bakit kung may savings ho pala o may excess ho pala, kulang po yung reserve, di ba dapat lalagay mo muna yung pera doon sa reserve?
Yeah, that's correct. It should go to the reserve if there is an excess. But that excess is there's really no excess because first of all, the hospitals are not being paid. They're closing down.
Government thinks there is an excess of 60 billion. That how much was it? Was it 60 billion?
You know,
That's
if they
why
can
moved it
use
the
that to
national
pay
treasury.
the hospitals will not fold up. So they keep on saying there is excess, but they have not been paying the hospitals.
Who ordered this? Was it the Secretary of Finance only? Order just came from the Department of Finance, and that would be at that time
Recto,
Secretary
Ralph
Recto. Okay, with what you are alleging, Justice, is he culpable of any wrongdoing?
Well, that's a violation of two provisions of the Constitution, and that would constitute technical malversation, because technical malversation is a situation where the law, there is a law saying that this money should be used to build schoolhouses. You use the money to build a bridge. You did not steal a single centavo. That is technical malversation because the law says you build a house, schoolhouse. And that's a law. You have to obey that. When you do it, that is what you call malversation, technical. Whether you actually receive a single centavo or not is immaterial because you did not follow the law. And so what I'm saying is this is technical malversation because the law says this should be used only for operations of PhilHealth. You used it for flood control.
Is it important, though, that before even a technical malversation complaint be filed against the Secretary Recto, that the Supreme Court finishes its decision?
Yes. Yeah. We have to wait for the Supreme Court decision because that is one of the issues.
Yeah.
No?
Kasi the issue is, pwede bang mag-transfer ang gobyerno?
Yeah. So if the Supreme Court will say, no, you cannot transfer, then it becomes technical malversation.
Anything else? Anything apart from technical malversation that he could be liable?
Well, if it's more than 50 million, it becomes plunder.
But this is 160 billion, you said, or 167 billion.
Yeah.
So also plunder.
So it will be plunder because this is a series because there were two transfers and there were also transfers from several tranches from.
The transfers from PhilHealth, it was supposed to be originally 89.9. That was earmarked. The first transfer was at, there were two transfers rather, of 60 billion, that totaled 60 billion.
30.
Tapos naiwan po yung 29.9. That was blocked by the Supreme Court.
Yeah, we were able to get a TRO for that.
On that. So what is the justice on the case before the Supreme Court?
The TRO is still there, so the total that was transferred was only 60 billion. And the President announced September 20, he said that we are returning
the 60
billion from savings of DPWH. That was September 20. 10 days later, September 30, Secretary Recto then said the reimbursement will come from the 2026 General Appropriations Act.
Oh, wait a minute, but that's our money.
Yeah,
That forms part of our
yes. So
remittances.
I'm complaining. I said, if it will come from the GAA of 2026, that's taxpayers' money. So here is 60 billion. It was taken and was and
Used.
flood control scammers took the money, ran away with the money. We are required to reimburse that.
Yeah.
Why?
Let's pay again next year, 60 billion.
Yeah, why will we reimburse it? We let the flood scammers restitute the government for that. They should do the reimbursement.
60 billion.
Yes.
So far, Justice, only 110 million has been given
Returned so
back.
far.
Yeah, by Henry Alcantara.
Yes.
He's still saying 190 million more. And of course, there are cars that were already, they tried to sell the cars of the Discayas and maybe Bryce Hernandez, but 60 billion is at least what needs to be returned. To PhilHealth, sir.
PhilHealth only.
Meron pa yung PDIC.
Yes, PDIC will need to get back their 107 billion.
So it's very important that whatever decision the Supreme Court ends up making basically really forms part of the land, so that now we understand, sir, if you can actually, well, if the Secretary of Finance can insert, no, wag na lang po yung insert, napaka-bad nung connotation, have a ruling there that in this GAA, any excess funds from GOCCs must be remitted to the
Yes.
National Treasury.
What I have done was to ask Congresswoman Laila De Lima and also Congressman Shell Jokno to sponsor a bill that any restitution from the flood control scammers should go to reimburse PhilHealth and PDIC. It's just like the ill-gotten wealth of the Marcoses. There is a law saying that the certain amount will go to fund the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program. So we can do that.
Was it just a recent conversation with them? Are they planning to file the bill?
Well, just recent. I bumped into them a few days ago.
Okay. And we'll see if that actually, if they do that, most likely it may seem like a correct move or the
Yes.
right move. And
Because I mean, it doesn't make sense. Why will we reimburse money that was stolen by somebody else, by the flood control scammers? They should be the ones to reimburse.
Why us? Why the taxpayers again?
It's double whammy.
Yeah.
It's our taxpayers' money that was stolen, and we have to reimburse it. And
Just-
they'll be running all the way to the bank, laughing.
Justice, sorry, last question. So I was asking an update from you on the petition before the Supreme Court. Where are you in terms of that?
Well, it's been submitted for resolution for quite some time, and we're expecting the decision to come out, no? Because it's been submitted for resolution.
All right. Retired Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Good to have you.
Thank you, Pingky. Thank you to our viewers.
Ito po ang News That Matters, mga kababayan. Isang share, like, subscribe lamang po. Masaya na po tayo dyan para updated po tayo sa makaganapan dito sa ating bansa. Mag-iingat po tayo palagi, mga kababayan. And God bless.